Hey everyone, and welcome to this month's Pokemon Roundtable discussion. This is a new monthly series that I've started where I bring on members of the community to discuss and provide their perspectives on the most relevant topics impacting the Pokemon TCG. This month's overarching theme is all about uncertainty and being able to adapt to an ever-changing Pokemon card landscape. Joining me in this discussion are two gentlemen you all know well. We have Jake from Pokenomics and James, aka Z, from ZandGEmporium. How's it going, guys?
Going good,
It's
yeah.
going good. Going good.
Excellent. Well, it's great to have you guys here.
How are things going for you?
It's good, man. It's good. Busy as ever. But as Z can attest, things are always better when you have great weather. And that's what we have right now. So we at least have that going for us.
Just right now, though. Just right now.
Yeah, give it a few more months. Give it a few more months, and
Yeah.
then it will be miserable.
Yeah, last year I made a video outside and I was wearing a sweater, and I remember James was watching the video and he was like, it's like 110, 120 degrees.
Oh yeah.
Where he was, and I was like,
Yeah.
comfortable and cool outside.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty much just the opposite for us as it is for most people. Like most people during the winter, you're basically bouncing from heat to heat. For us during the summer, it's you're bouncing from AC to AC, whether that's your home, your car, or a restaurant, you're just trying to get into the AC. So we all have our trials and tribulations. And speaking of trials and tribulations, that's kind of what we're going to be getting into here today, and maybe to put a lot of people's nerves at ease with things that are going on, or maybe not. Maybe we just exacerbate that. Who knows? But before we get started, what I'd like to do is just give everyone a little understanding on how these roundtables will operate. So every episode, we'll have three big topics for discussion or debate, and each person will have the opportunity to share their insights and perspectives so that you, the larger community, can have a more holistic outlook on these important events. So without further ado, Jake, Z, you guys ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So first big topic here, it's perhaps the most anticipated yet controversial event of February. It's happening this weekend on none other than Pokemon Day. And as many of you might have guessed, I'm talking about none other than, we'll call it the second coming of Logan Paul and the first edition base set box break. So given that, the question is this: what impact, if any, do you think that this individual and this event is going to have on the overall Pokemon cards market? And how long will we see the ramifications of this? Jake, do you want to go ahead and lead us off with this first topic?
Sure. So I think one of the first rules of thinking about investing or any sort of financial, calculations when you're just thinking about building a collection is that whatever the price is at the moment, there's future thinking that's already been priced in to whatever the current prices are. And so applying that to this situation, last time around when Logan Paul announced that he was going to do the box break, no one thought it was going to be, including him, that it was going to be such a success and was going to bring so many people in. So right before when he announced it, the prices didn't really skyrocket until, I mean, it helped and it started to move it, but it really skyrocketed after he did it because of that awareness piece. So many new people who hadn't thought about Pokemon in a long time suddenly became aware of Pokemon again, collectors who wanted to come back into it, and a lot of influencers and investors became aware that there was a lot of money. They saw how much money and attention Logan Paul got, and that attracted them as well to the space. So we had all sorts of new money coming into the space, from high-end, investor types to average to many, probably tens of thousands, 100,000, just sort of average collectors wanting to buy and reconnect with Pokemon. So we're in a very different situation this time around. So one question is, how many more people out there are going to watch this one that didn't watch the last one? And that we don't know the answer to, but you'd think less, unless somehow the algorithm touches a whole new brand of people that, you know, somehow weren't already watching Logan Paul's videos or aware of this. So I think that it'll have much less of an effect than last time because of that, in terms of changing it. I think too, people already anticipated potentially hyping the market or moving the market up. And so that's already been priced in, I think, to some of the prices we're seeing now, which didn't happen the last time. I actually think Logan Paul even just announcing that he was still in Pokemon, not even necessarily doing the break, was actually really huge in terms of, I think, quelling a lot of people's anxiety and fear and stabilizing the hobby a little bit after the, you know, fairly large to pretty extreme drop off we saw in certain cards, like Base Set Unlimited and certain commons, uncommons, and vintage, and you know, these kind of 70% drops we saw on the prices of certain PSA cards, that sort of thing. So what I would expect is that, you know, it's going to be really fun. It's going to be very successful. Lots of people are going to tune in. And I think it's going to help, I think, people feel more comfortable and stable a little bit in the prices for a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if you see prices go up, particularly on the lower pop items. I don't think you're going to see quite the intensity of sales on items that are maybe not as that are not as rare, such as like unlimited base. You know, I think that people last time around, there were so many influencers who made videos basically finding their childhood collection, saying I have $100,000 when really they had like $1,000 collections, and it created all this like hysteria. Any Charizard will be worth like $20,000, you know. And you know, this time around it'll be interesting to see, you know, does Mizkif, you know, Ludwig, Moist Critical, some of these big Twitch streamers, does this get the audience and them wanting to do another round of those types of box openings, which I think will certainly increase the prices of booster boxes, and also possibly the PSA cards a little bit if a lot of them do it. But it's those are the types of things I'm thinking about. I don't think it's going to be disappointing. I don't see anything negative, you know, on the other side coming from it. I just think it's not going to have too much of a huge positive effect.
And James, what about you? Are you kind of in the same boat there, or what's your take on all of this?
Yeah, I would agree with Jake on that, because I think he made a good point on the, you know, if we're talking about, you know, what's going to affect in the market, you know, when he came onto the scene, it was just kind of you know, he has 20 something million followers on, you know, a range of different platforms. And, you know, he brought that out to where, you know, all of a sudden everybody kind of knew about it. Now he's doing it again. Are those people going to be, you know, reliving? It's like, oh, I just forgot about it in the past 2 months, you know, after that, and I'll come back into it. I'm not sure if, you know, people have really short attention spans, but I'm not sure if it's that short. I don't think they've forgotten about Pokemon. Will be re-coming into it. If I'm talking about like the prices of things, you know, I can see, like Jake was saying, and I agree with him, as booster boxes, I think could kind of see a stabilization or going up, because you know, if there are a lot of streamers that once again want to open it, or just anybody who wants to open boxes, you know, we have, you know, those are things that are 20 years old and they keep being open and open and open. You know, if you reduce the supply, you keep reducing it, you know, simple economics, the price is going to stabilize or go up in that instance. The PSA, you know, market, you know, I think once again, all his fans, or all the influencer people that kind of went around that event the first time, you know, they learned about the market, or, you know, they've already, you know, bought what they have. I might be wrong with that, because I mean, his packs went for what, 3 or 4 times more than it did last time. And last time it was like, what, 11,000. And at that time it was like, oh, that's way too much. Now they're 30 or 40,000. It's like, okay. So maybe, I mean, there's so much money floating around, and all these assets. I mean, we were talking about this beforehand, just the housing market, just it's crazy. And, he's talking about selling he was selling those, was it NFTs, the non-fungible tokens? I think he
Yeah.
sold out of, or he sold 2,000 of them in a day and made like $4 million off that. And these are literally digital pieces. And I went down a weird rabbit hole of NFTs like 2 nights ago, just like, what is all this stuff? And, there's like video games that sell digital land that's worth, they're hundreds of millions of dollars in digital land, and there's so much money floating around that I'm not going to underestimate any influence of any influencer on any product. So yeah, it's up in the air. It can only be, I think, positive for the hobby. I don't really see any big, negative, unless people kind of think it's a money grab thing. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's going to raise as much awareness as it can, because he's already shown it. But I mean, the prices, I don't really see any downfall. Like, I don't see in any world where him doing this makes the prices of cards and boxes go down, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a couple. Go ahead, Jake.
No, please.
What I was going to mention there is you guys both made really good points there. And one of the things that I've been contemplating recently is I'm kind of on the same mindset as yourself, where, it was just a couple months ago that he did, his first edition box break. So how much is really going to change just a couple months later with the exposure and the notoriety and everything like that? I think this time around, the difference that I see is that now we're kind of starting to look at a perfect storm. So you talked about, now we're going to do another first edition box break. In my opinion, he's garnered a little bit more of a well-rounded entourage this time than some of the people he had around last time. You've got more knowledgeable people in the hobby that have supplied him with these booster boxes. They're kind of in on this particular break. And then on top of that, talking about the amount of money that is being pumped into the economy, it's looking more and more that we're probably going to get another round of stimulus very soon thereafter with this particular box break. So when I look at that and I see, okay, and then on top of that, you've really got the trifecta in that we also have Pokemon Day falling on the same day that he's doing the box break. A lot of hype around that, a lot of eyes. They announced Post Malone, and then there's going to be several celebrities that are now getting in on it. So it's almost, in my opinion, that Pokemon has seen they've capitalized on the hype that is created by celebrities, and they're kind of bringing more of that into the hobby as a whole. And now you've got somebody that is, bringing this exposure back at the perfect time in Pokemon Day. And subsequently, there is going to be another round of stimulus, the largest that we've had thus far, being pumped back into the economy very soon after this. So, to me, when I look at it, I think if there is going to be a fluctuation in price, again, I don't think that it's going to have any negative consequences on prices. And it's probably going to be, in my opinion, you're going to see it more with very old Wizards of the Coast, probably base set-esque type of sets, and then probably modern as well. But if there is going to be a fluctuation in price, it's probably just going to go up, and it's going to be with those graded cards, more than likely from base set, the base set series, first edition, unlimited, Japanese even, and a lot of that due to the influx of money coming into the economy. So I'm kind of interested to see what you guys think of kind of all of those cofactors working together.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely the stimulus checks. I think that one's pretty straightforward. I think about things like when we look at how Marvel cards have, gone up hugely in value now, how Star Wars, it's starting to move away from just the core, Pokemon, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, which was more of the core, Yu-Gi-Oh really being the third, Pokemon being a distant, somewhat distant second, to Magic, and then certainly sports being sort of the big market. These other markets where there was zero market at all are now being created in some of these other sorts of things. So cards in general, are collectibles, and online shopping is having a moment because of all these factors and us being at home during this year, right? So that's having a moment. Then within that moment, cards are having a moment, even beyond other collectibles, for some reason, and we can get into that. It's an interesting conversation. Why are my cards going up so much, but not some rare other Pokemon memorabilia or some figurines like Dragon Ball figurines, which are pretty rare. A lot of that's probably going to tie into what us kids, what we collected as a kid, and how easy it is to store, and then grading, PSA grading and all these things. But yeah, it's really interesting. There's so much money coming into all of these markets to have them all move this much, and to be able to spread out that Marvel cards that I was buying for $30-$40. I was buying complete sets. Now those sets are worth, a number of those cards are PSA 10 worthy. So these sets are probably worth like $10,000, $11,000 if I were to liquidate them right now. $30, $40, $50. You could get that for before. These crazy, huge exponential growth type items. You were even starting to see it creep in now into some sports cards and sports cards boxes that were cheaper than they were 20 years ago, a year or two ago. These were the things that were affected by sort of the last bubble in sports and that got destroyed. These items are now becoming valuable, and the rookie cards from those things. So I think it's really important to take a broad look of like what's going on that's affecting all these markets that really has nothing to do with Pokemon. And then why did Pokemon start when it did? Why did it go up so much before some of these other things? And then why are people moving to these other things? And I think what's really important to think about that is, I think Pokemon is likely less speculative than some of these other items. And I feel more confident that it's more people really wanted the items that drove it up initially, that brought the investor speculator types. I think a lot of these other items, yes, they're cool. Yes, people are seeing that they're undervalued as compared to Pokemon when they see what Pokemon did. But I wonder questions and think of questions like, is it really just like investors and speculators are like, cards are having a moment, we're going to put tons of money in it. These are only $30. We saw what happened in Pokemon. All we need to do is do massive buyouts on these things. And then people will respond to those new high price points. They'll buy in, and it creates either what can be massive bubbles or massive new sustainable markets that are completely created out of manipulative, intentional, investing strategies. And it's fascinating stuff to try and unpack.
Yeah, there's just there's so much money being pumped into like almost everything. It's crazy just to see stock market at all-time highs, real estate, crypto, sports cards, Pokemon cards, like Marvel, Dragon Ball Z. There's there's just like so many things that are just absolutely, like I was saying, the NFTs, just digital land, digital art. It has, it's just millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in these things. And there are companies now that are, buying these high-end cards that are just doing fractional shares or fractional parts of it. And who knows where that, will go in that industry. And, it's nuts the amount of money that's just being pumped into everything. And I'm just, I do, if you're talking about just about Pokemon, I do like the fact that, people do like displaying it. They do like they feel a different way versus something like the stock market, where it's like, if you invest in the stock market, you just want to make money. I don't care if it's Apple or Tesla or some weird 5-cent biotech stock. I don't care. I'm there to make money. Whereas crypto, people think, oh, you use it, but a lot of people just use that to make money, as well. So I kind of like that aspect of Pokemon. It makes me feel a little safer, but at the same time, when every single thing has just absolutely spiked, you kind of get in the back of your head, it's like, well, there's some kind of other big wheel being turned here where it's like, are we in this weird inflationary, even though the government, won't, it's like, oh, well, the inflation's under control and everything's just fine. And yet you see it with your own eyes, like, well, why is everything, absolutely just in a crazy, spike area? And that's what you're saying, Jake. There are people that are like the Marvel cards or the Dragon Ball Z stuff that people didn't look at. Harry Potter, right? That's spiked big time. People didn't look at it. So people are starting to, there's so much money in other things. They're like, oh, let's pour money into, I was just looking, someone told me it's like, oh, they're really cheap Lord of the Rings boxes. It's like, $80 or something. I'm like, well, I'm not gonna buy. I did love Lord of the Rings. There's gonna be a new series on Lord of the Rings, and like Amazon is making, a big thing. It's like, oh,
Middle
well,
Earth. Middle Earth is the
Middle
next
Earth.
thing. The next thing
that like, just put more money. Like what is it? Dogecoin, and that's like a little. And there's 100. It's just like a worthless thing, and it's gone up, 500, 1,000% or something. So there's just so much money being poured into everything that it's kind of scary.
So if we unpack it, it's like, are we concerned about inflation? Is that what's happening here, where money is just being printed? Or is it that people are now not spending money on restaurants, on their usual hobbies, on travel, and all of the money in our sort of consumer society that was being spent on these other things have all gone to online shopping and have all gone into things like collectibles, and that actually describes the majority of it. But what happens if we think that's a big part of it, which I do, a very big part of it, what happens when the lockdowns end, when people go on vacations again? Instead of spending that $4,000 or $5,000 in some sort of investment, every family is spending that $4,000 or $5,000 extra they have a year on a vacation, like they maybe were doing before. What happens when people stop being able to see the returns, and when your items become a lot more illiquid? Because I think people are going to panic if they can't sell their items easily. And I also think people are going to, even if the items don't go down, there's going to be a panic of like, I'm not seeing a lot of this card bought and sold all day. So can I really unload my, $50,000 in Pokemon at any, in a moment if I need it? And then also seeing the returns, the growth stopping to happen. Are people going to take a second look at their collection and be like, I don't even really like Pokemon that much? Really, a lot of this was about money and the excitement. It was going up a lot. And if I'm being real with myself, it's probably time to kind of move on or do some other hobbies. And I think all of that stuff is super important to consider in terms of the risks of when that happens. But yeah, I think with tying it back into Logan Paul, I think the two ways, and I made a video on this kind of 6-7 months ago, the two ways like markets can really be built and made are, it's all about confidence, because, and this is true for Bitcoin, it's true for anything like these, it's true for the dollar, it's true for anything. It's like people need to feel safe and confident that this thing, other people are going to want this thing, particularly when it's not a company that makes a product, or it doesn't provide some sort of obvious function to people. Now we can say Bitcoin does provide a function because it's better than the physical dollar for various reasons. That's why it's going to take it over. There are all these types of arguments, but a lot of it is just, particularly in the short term, a lot of it is just, how do you get over people's fear and anxiety and make them willing to place 30,000, 350,000, 900,000 in a physical item with the idea that I can take my money out of it. Like, I'm placing my money in this object and I still have that money. That's not just going to zero. And I think you convince people of that. Logan Paul putting $2 million into it makes a lot of people a lot more comfortable. It's just the reality. And seeing how people responded to that made a lot of investors and a lot of people much more comfortable putting their money into this type of market. Him coming back in is going to make people feel safer and more comfortable. So celebrity is really important. To go to your point, PokéNav, of them bringing celebrities in, bringing people that we trust, that we think know what they're doing, bringing financially savvy people, having influencers like us, or people saying, it's okay, guys, you can hold your cards, you'll hang in there. It's like that type of stuff has serious psychological effects on being able to build the market in a positive direction and tell people to hold. When Rudy's making these like diamond hand videos, has a serious effect on people holding. When all the GME people were making those videos, diamond hands, everyone telling each other not to sell, all of that is that psychological, if we don't sell, if we don't panic and we hang in together, we're going to get more people in this, it's going to grow. The problem is when that gets too far detached from the actual value of the items to the people holding the items, that's when you get a tulip bulb, situation when it's all psychological. It's all like a social psychological experiment of us all just agreeing something that none of us actually feel is valuable versus separate from that social experiment. We look at the card and we see value there, and we would rather have that card than that vacation or something else that we could do with that money in our lives, that sort of thing. So it's complicated.
No, that's really good, man. It's very well put. And, like you said, I think that a lot of what we're seeing right now, my hope is that we are starting to see a little bit more of that normalization, a little bit more stabilization within the market rather than the massive fluctuations that we've seen over the last year, because ultimately that's what we want to see. That's a sustainable market over the long term. James, I guess I would ask, the same thing kind of, on this topic, the recommendations or what you would say to those out there that are, maybe trepidatious or unsure of things to come.
I mean, it is, an unknown time in, Pokemon. It was a lot, like I've told on my channel, it's a lot easier to buy collections and go out there and kind of either flip stuff or hold stuff, and the market's a lot more stable, right? Because it's like you kind of, when you buy it, when it's going to come back from PSA or whatnot, that you have a reasonable expectation of the prices. If you're looking to buy a collection that's, someone's like, oh, it's worth 10,000. It's like, well, yeah, but a year ago it was $1,800, right? So hopefully, if I buy it and grade it PSA, and a year from now it's back down to 2,500, it still rose. And that, if you're looking at a long time frame, but I kind of bought it up there. It's, I would say if someone, the biggest thing I say is that if you're going to buy something, people say like all the time, they email and say, oh, should I buy this or that? What do you think I should put my money into? The biggest thing is that you should, if you're going to buy something, buy the thing that you're going to hold on to the longest. This time is probably going to be your best friend. You can't time anything. Who knows when a Logan Paul is going to pop up. You can look for definitely sections of the market that seem to be ignored. Like I think, Jake was talking before, I don't know how many months ago about, like Top Sun or stuff that was like really vintage, and it was kind of like, oh, well, how is this original art and original stuff, not there, but, Base Set Unlimited, that there's, a million of those printed out there, have that kind of a difference. But, a lot of people, when they come to me, it's not like they're looking between, Top Sun or, Base Set. They usually have two items that are pretty similar, right? They usually have like, oh, this modern product or this modern product, or this vintage booster box or this vintage booster box. It's kind of normally in the same, it's where you how you grew up, what you collected, you kind of have that range of those years of what you really look at. So
they want you to make them feel safe in purchasing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They want you to give them the green light because they trust you.
Yeah. So, when somebody comes to me and they say, oh, should I buy a Team Rocket box or a Jungle box? It's like, well, which one, which one are you going to hold on to longest? Is there one that's like, oh, well, I really like Team Rocket because it had that really unique box on the outside and had the dark chart and all these dark cards, and that was great. But Jungle's okay too. It's like, well, do the Team Rocket because that's the one you're going to hold on to, and that gives you the time friend, right? But that'd be my point of view on just a broad view of what to buy. I don't really like to answer those what to buy questions because it's just a total guess. And at this point, anybody could have said anything in the past year, and it probably would have gone up. Unless you're really bad at picking stuff, then then you could just quit. You had picked something a year ago and hadn't gone up, but yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of tying that back to the financial markets, the old saying, it's not about timing the market, it's time in the market. I think it's a viable point here as well. Typically, the people that are in it for the long term are probably going to be the ones that shake out well in the end.
And I mean, you still have to buy. You still have to look at that. It's not like buy modern cards for $1,000 there's thousands of them still at PSA, right? That might be coming back. You still have to do your research and kind of know the market for it. It's not just like a blind thing and then just time will solve all problems. But yeah, that kind of be my,
I preferred your buy anything video,
Z. Yeah.
I give up, guys. I'm going to stop picking individual things because everything goes up. Just buy Charizards.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of PSA, that's actually a great segue into our next topic here. And, as you guys know, the level of people submitting their cards for grading over the last year has been astronomical. Z probably knows this better than anybody. And it's revealed it's also revealed the bottlenecks within the structure of the various grading companies and really not being able to handle these things at scale. So the question is, how are grading companies going to need to adapt and change to this ever increasing demand in order to fulfill orders in a more customary time frame to what we used to know? So James, Z, if you want to lead us off on this one, I think you're the best man to do so.
Well, I mean, I could talk to you because, we submit to, PSA here at Greater Gem, but I mean, it's still a mystery how that behind the curtain, how PSA really operates back there. It's, they've increased capacity. They bought another, one or two warehouses, increased by hundreds of thousands of square feet, have hired so many new employees, but they still can't, the amount that's being submitted is just way more than, they can handle. And, it's at that point, when you're running a business, and I've faced that as, like a Greater Gem business, it's like, okay, well then the demand is scaling. It keeps, it's going to record prices. How many people do you hire? How do you expand to where you don't want to over expand? You don't want to just say, okay, let's hire thousands of people. Let's get 10 warehouses and let's just get this going. Because all of a sudden it's like, well, that's not really how you can run it as a, CEO, because it's like, well, we're buying it to capacity of record prices. What happens if, something goes down? You kind of have to have a buffer there. So, as a business, that's kind of how you're always kind of behind the demand curve, in that aspect. And we have the parabolic, enormous amount of, demand that's come into, that's kind of what created those bottlenecks. And you guys have all, worked at jobs and gone in there. It takes a while to learn, to do anything. It's people's system, their processes. Even if you hire someone, it's probably going to take. I had a boss a few jobs ago, and I remember her telling me, she's like, "I'm going to expect you to be an idiot for 6 months. So if you make mistakes or whatnot, I'm just going to expect you to be an idiot for 6 months." And that's, this surge has probably happened since what would you say, like May, something like that, April, maybe, when it started like really bottlenecking. So it just takes a while to get in there, and we haven't seen any slowdown in that aspect. Now PSA has been bought out. It was the middle or late of last year, and we actually had to close Greater Gem because we didn't want to. They're going through now changes of management. We don't know when it's going to happen. Once again, they're kind of hush on certain things. But we closed at the beginning of December, just so we can get everybody in, anticipating that January 1st they'd have some kind of price raise or some kind of changes in the service levels, just because they've always, like the past 4 years, they've raised their prices January 1st. They didn't do anything. They were just completely silent. I mean, I've been on sports boards too. I mean, I know some what's it called? PC sports cards, I think. I think they'd have like 400,000 or 500,000 cards at PSA and just sports. And they were talking too, it's like, oh, we, expect that, nothing happened. So, I know that, shut down because we know some changes, don't know what, but some kind of changes are coming soon. And it might be they eliminate some kind of service that isn't making them as much money. They might be the new people that bought them are saying, okay, why are you only charging this much for all, this incredible demand? Let's raise it $1, $2, $5. I don't know what they're going to do. But I think the biggest thing is that it just takes time, to actually ramp up a business and have your business plan be like, okay, is this a new sustainable level? So let's, get the procedures and processes in there. And I can tell you from personal experience that going to the PO box, getting all the packages, opening all the packages, just taking out everything, counting them, printing out the thing, logging them, making sure they're all right, and the same, in card savers. Just that process alone. I can't imagine how many packages, like how big their warehouse is. I just can't. I literally can't imagine it. And that's not even like all this stuff you have to do just before the grading process and keeping them all. It's a very manual process, and to have this much demand spike, it's such a manual process. I think it just takes a long time, and demand hasn't stopped. So they just continue, it's just like traffic, you get one car to stop, it kind of bottlenecks it. You keep getting cars to stop. It can go for miles down the road. I think it's just kind of what we're seeing there. And I think, Beckett has been way behind for like way before this, they were like had year-long turnaround times. And now CGC came into the market and they were, faster, but I think they've become slower as well. And so I'm sure people are sending into there. I know people who have wanted to send through GridGem to PSA, but they're like, I just want my cards quicker. So I'm sure they're getting a lot of that business. And once they slow down, I'm sure they're getting the same kind of bottleneck back there, again. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents.
And Jake, well, I guess we'll go ahead and turn it over to you, kind of get your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, so I'm I actually just recently sat down and interviewed a fellow who used to work at NGC, part of CGC now, Collector's Universe, to doing coins, grading coins, to talk, and he's now a big Pokemon fan and does a lot of Pokemon investing, to talk about his experience as a grader and what that process was like, and the errors and the different ways that they tried to quality control. And I think, speaking from a purely common sense perspective and not from an insider knowledge of PSA inner workings perspective, to the point that James made, it seems like common sense that one thing you'd have to be concerned about is with lots of new people starting all at once, them trying to build out capacity really quickly while they have huge pressure and backlog, while they know that they're losing money. Are they going to hold the same standards? Are they going to be able to maintain the same standards, in terms of quality control? Because generally they'll have like, and I don't know the inner workings of PSA, but a grading card company will one form it can take is you'll have like 3 people quickly in less than a minute, a few seconds, way less than a minute, look over a card quickly, pass, score it, pass to the next one, quickly look at it, pass to the next one, quickly look at it. You'll have someone who's fairly expert within that line who can catch like the extreme errors, who has more experience, and then it goes to like a quality check, a second thing. But every time the quality check person sends it back, it costs PSA some money and time. So it puts an incentive, because they have to crack the case, they have to reholster it, they have to, it takes time that they could be grading others. There's so much pressure to be grading more. Now they're competing with CGC and some of these other companies for market share, for market space. They don't want to give that not only are they losing out on money right now, but if you let CGC build itself and become the more credible, reliable, quicker service, that's going to hurt them long term, which is, I think, the more dangerous thing financially for them is how do we maintain being the head at PSA. So it creates all these interesting dilemmas of, okay, do we slow things down because what's most important is quality, and people are just going to have to wait, because if we start making mistakes, CGC is really going to take over, from us. Is it, or are we going to try and, speed it up, and we're going to have a lot of newer people who odds are going to make more mistakes, and we're going to put a little bit of pressure to not send things back unless it's egregious, whatever it is, to streamline it. And again, no insider knowledge of PSA, just from that common sense perspective. All of that must be what they're thinking about, and must be some of the pressure they're under. We're talking to on Clubhouse. We were talking to the head grader at PSA a little bit. Were you in that room, James? I don't know if you were there.
I think Lauren, my wife, was.
Lauren was, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because she was talking to him a little bit. When we were trying to pick his brain a little bit on these sort of subjects, and he was like, he's not in the. He was like, I'm either not saying or I'm not in the inner. I'm not in those types of meetings, because he was the quality grader. But yeah, I mean, it's. I would love to get more insight into those processes, but I'm not sure exactly how to get it. So I think my strategy is just to, human error. Like, human error increases when there's more pressure, when there's more anxiety, when there's more money on the line, when there's more greed. That's when you see more fraud. That's when you see more scams. That's when you see more incompetence. And that is nothing personal. That is zero personal attack on PSA. That's, if I was working at that company, I would, be under all of those forces and experience the same thing. So as a collector thinking about, where do I grade? What do I think about that? A big part of our conversation was, talking about, is PSA grading harder now, easier? Is it going to be more inconsistent? Are we seeing more inconsistent grades now? How to handle that as a collector? And one big takeaway is this idea of, becoming potentially even more important to collect the card and not the grade. And eye appeal, which we do not talk about in this hobby. Older, more established hobbies like sports cards talk constantly about eye appeal. We'll have two PSA 8s sell for largely different amounts, and people will be like, how is it possible, right, that two 8s, for example, two Charizard 8s could sell for such a dramatic amount? And the answer in a number of cases can be eye appeal. That someone actually took the time to look over the cards. One card was really beat up, and one card was probably should have been a 9, and one card probably should have been a 7. And then you're getting huge differences, right? Two 8s could be very, very different if one should have been really a 7 and one should have really been a 9. Difference between 9 and 7 is humongous. We're talking surface scratches or significant whitening differences. Yeah. So I think that is where I would go with it. And I've been preaching that and saying that for a while, but I think it becomes even more important if we start feeling like the grades are even more off, more inconsistent. So, and for me, I like taking huge sample sizes. This whole idea, of course, that the old certs were, had worse grades, that they're grading tougher now. These types of things. Clearly, the data supports that. My experience supports that a lot of time. But it could fluctuate. I wouldn't assume that they're doing that even 100% intentionally. Sometimes that happens just when the money value goes up. You have more people looking at an item. When a very expensive item comes in, and this was, at CGC or at, NGC, they would have a lot of people look at that coin. And it's the same guys, and it's the most experience on those really high value items. So you may get a much closer eye, a much tougher inspection. Whereas when you're seeing 1,000 modern cards and the difference is only $5, $10, $25, $30, there isn't going to be that level of, you're still, of course, going to try to do a good job. But the reality is the companies just aren't going to spend the same amount of time on it, aren't going to put the same amount of scrutiny on it. And so I think as a collector, just being aware of that and figuring out how to collect or invest in that framework until we replace everything with AI, if we ever do that.
And that's one thing that I really wanted to discuss here is you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but CGC, I believe they use a combination of both like a computer-based algorithm or computer-based system along with human graders, you know, in that kind of subjective and objective nature. And for me, you know, when I'm looking at it and I look at, well, how can they expedite the process while at the same time getting a higher level of consistency? To me, that's the next step, is incorporating more AI-based technology to where you can expedite that process more, where maybe you're processing it through some system and it's got all of the dimensions, it's got all of the algorithms already built in, to where, you know, I've said this before, if you sent a card through and it was a PSA 10, or if Beckett and CGC adopted the same approach, if you sent it through and you got that PSA 10, or you got that Beckett Black Label 10, or you got a CGC 10, if you sent it through 10,000 times, it would come through in the exact same grade. Now, to your point, Jake, I think that, you know, the eye appeal, if they don't go down that route, that would probably be the next thing, to where we've talked about, or it's been referred to as the junk slab era, where there's just every single card, it doesn't matter what it is being sent off to be graded, to where at some point the value and the premium that graded cards normally garner will not be there anymore. And so now you're looking more, you know, for that eye appeal. But now that PSA has become a private entity, they're not a publicly held company anymore. To me, that offers them more financial leverage to start to incorporate some of these other things, the AI, or at the very least, maybe increasing the capacity of their workforce, or maybe increasing their overall footprint in the manner of having more walk-in locations that you can actually go to. Maybe one in you know, the 10 major cities in the US, to where if you're within a certain proximity, maybe you can walk in and just deliver your cards there on site, have it graded that day. You know, we've been talking about real estate, commercial real estate. It's probably at the bottom of where we're going to see it. Might be a good time to take advantage of commercial real estate. But those are all of the things that I've been taking into consideration, and thinking, how could PSA really take it to the next level and get to a point to where we don't have these bottlenecks anymore. And then also investors and collectors are looking to get their cards graded more so from the standpoint of consistency. You know that, again, if you sent that card through 10,000 times, it's going to come back in the exact same grade. And if you sent that over to another company, if you cross-graded from Beckett to PSA, vice versa, that there would be that consistency among industries. And then maybe it's more of an eye appeal of who has the better case at that point. Maybe it's more of the aesthetic value and that people are really going for, along with the actual encapsulation of those products. So just kind of my thoughts on it. I'm interested to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, and two cards can deserve the same grade, but have different eye appeal. Mm-hmm. So that's something that other hobbies are aware of and actually pay for. So, and we're seeing it with swirls, you know, and swirls is a bit of a joke in some spaces, but swirls, you know, do you prefer centering or a little bit of back edge wear? You know, what are people actually going to pay? You know, what types of nines, even if they are all nines, is a better looking card to display over time? You know, in the sports card world, you'll see 3 or 4 fours of some, you know, amazing rookie card sell that they can sell pretty drastically differently, because one of them has like really nice coloring, you know, bright, vibrant colors. One of them is really dull. They may all deserve the same grade because there are other issues with the one that has vibrant colors. But the vibrant color one, everyone looks at it, or the majority looks at it and is like, I like that better. You know, I have more of a response to that. So I think, you know, if that becomes swirls, if that becomes whatever it is, that stuff does actually matter. If it's not hype, you know, if it's not people telling other people that matters, but if it's your actual like reaction to it. Of course, when people tell you something, you can start to develop a reaction to it. So this is where it gets really complicated, and why hype and coercion and market manipulation is so effective. But and getting people to coalesce around a belief that they didn't really even initially have, that now they think they did, these types of things. But it's important. And I do think that I hear too many people talking about grade, and I see these huge purchases a 9 or an 8 or a 7, and it's I would be surprised, and again, it's for me, it's being that student of history of other collectible hobbies, if Pokemon doesn't take more of that route over time, when it gets really more established, because right now it's a lot about the money and about the card grade. I do think that Pokemon will survive and it will be an established, long-term collectible hobby. And I think you're going to have a lot more conversations about the art. You're going to have a lot more conversations about the visuals, about the actual aesthetic qualities. It's going to be less about the money again. It's still going to be a lot about the money, but it's going to be less just purely about the grade and the money, and more about why do we like that card? Why do people like that? The actual aesthetic value and beauty of that card, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do find that interesting too, about the, the eye appeal, and, how that's different in sports and other ones where, how many cards that come through, Graded Gem, people like, it's like, oh, is this OC? Can they make it OC? And it's like, in like sports or otherwise, like they hate OC. Like it's really bad. Like that's like the worst thing you can have is like a off center. Let's like bent, or has a huge crease, but because that's a really bad eye appeal. It's just like off the center. But for Pokemon, like there's sometimes where they'll pay a premium, if it has that OC grade. So it's interesting, the different markets and the different, you were talking about swirls. It's just, it's just, it is a different animal, but yeah, that eye appeal thing is, we'll see how the market kind of, goes down the line. And you were also talking about, PokéNav, about the consistency. That's also a big thing. And Jake, you were saying about how PSA or these other companies are going to be, just pushing it out no matter what, or have it slow just to have the consistency there. And I really do hope that they, do the consistent route, because I've seen these sports channels that, there are some of these young guys who they're making thousands of dollars, and literally all they're doing is cracking stuff that's like 9s and getting 10s, or cracking whatever, BGS 9 and trying to get BGS 9.5. That's like all they're doing. They're making thousands of dollars, literally the same card, and they're selling it back and forth. I remember commenting in a few of those videos, and I'm like, so do you, aren't you like kind of, I don't know, like ethically, like you got to say, well, this was a PSA 9, or now you're buying a PSA 10. I don't know. It's a little, the consistency aspect really needs to be, like you were saying, the 10,000 through, it really needs to be, even if it's slow coming out, coming back to returns, it really just needs to be there, because if it's not consistent, well, then why do you grade anyway? That's the whole point, So,
well, you have people argue that grading should just be for authentication, and it's a complicated thing, because it's like, when you see the 10, you get excited. Will that ever really go away? It's hard when you're in a period. It's very hard to pull yourself out of it and look at it from like how people could think about things 5, 10, 20 years down the line. And that's one of the big errors that we as all humans, we make. And that's why going to history and looking at mistakes or patterns that humans have done before is so important. Because right now it's like, when I see a 10, when I'm looking through collections, I'm looking for 9s and 10s, and I'm seeing money and dollar signs, and that's what everyone's experiencing, right? To get it to separate from that, or, whereas like right now I'm getting really into like Dragon Ball Z, and some of these like vintage stuff there, and they don't put the same premium on condition there. There's a different amount. A lot of the gatekeepers and people think grading's stupid and a waste of time, and it's interesting where these people are going right now, because I think people coming from the Pokemon world and some of these other hobbies are going and saying, you fools, like there's insane amounts of money to be made, and they're right to, they are probably right now in this time period. And some of these people may underestimate the demand clearly underestimate the demand, at least right now, for these types of premiums that 9s and 10s go. I'm able to buy gem mint cards that there are very few in the world, over one or less than one of the world, zero of, in the world in PSA 10 quality. I'm able to buy candidates for those things for only like $100 more. On a $500, it's $600, or $600, $700. Whereas Pokemon, it would be like 500 to 5,000, these type of exponential multiples. In Marvel, you're seeing the exponential multiples. So going back to what we were talking about before, trying to trace who is who and what markets are moving into other markets, and where are people forming their perspectives on what is valuable, and then who's telling those people what should be valuable. Because so much of this is just influencers telling other people, and then everyone kind of coalescing and agreeing that that thing is the most valuable, versus sort of bottom up, organic kind of, like when we were children, obviously the Pokemon company marketed this to us, but the IP is so addictive. Like you gotta catch them all. And the video games were so, like, they were like being on drugs, right? They had, it wasn't someone telling me, my friends weren't telling me, like, play this game, and I was like, I don't want to, it's not fun, like that type of thing. So I think understanding where is value being created around you, and are you being told that something has value, or is value coming from in you? Can you even sort that out? Does it even matter in the long run? That's all the stuff that I think is going to be fascinating to kind of sort out over the years. And I think those are the right things to think about. I don't think that their answers are, unfortunately, I think, beyond anyone's grasp. So for me, it's looking at older card hobbies, seeing where there are differences in the way that comic books took off, and how people feel about those, and what happened in some of the retraces versus sports, versus Magic the Gathering, which I don't know as much, Yu-Gi-Oh, now Marvel, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Star Trek, maybe Middle Earth next. You heard it here first now.
Yeah, no, I totally, I really like how, Jake, you look at just all these other markets, because that's kind of what you have to, it really helps you pull back and see these things. It's like, oh, well, Star Wars is really popular, but it's like it's like a dead card game for, forever. And it was, it's like, I just really don't like these people who be like, well, it's the largest media franchise on earth, so there you go. It's like, well, yeah, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have the same kind of fundamentals of supply and demand, and all this kind of differences between the two. So I think you're really on track, and looking at other history of other items to kind of better at least ground yourself, right?
I love rarity. Rarity is wonderful, because rarity is like, okay, like I have a sense of how rare this item is. I don't have to be as stressed out about the demand, because I feel like there will be at least enough demand, some demand for this. But I do think that the other important piece of this, and I was listening to some entrepreneurs talk today, and sort of the lingo that they use, the other side of it is things can change. People can change. When we talk about these NFTs, like, if you are too conservative and too stuck in the past and too only looking at history, you can miss out on things like Bitcoin. You would have missed out on Amazon. You would have missed out on technology. It would have been too scary. You could miss out on NFTs. You could miss out on certain new collectibles. I was telling people, Harry Potter at $35 a box, there's organic collector value here. And people are actually overspending for Pokemon, and people were pushing back saying, no one could ever, and now those boxes, I was paying $75, they're $3,000. Now, they should not be. It's stupid. It's insane. But, whatever, it is what it is right now. But even if they had gone up to $250, that's a 3 times growth. At the same time I was buying those Harry Potter booster boxes, the Pokemon boxes were at their height and retraced from the Logan Paul. So I think it's understanding. For me, I trust the value a lot more than I trust the psychology, like, of the market. And because the influencers, it's so hard to know where people are going to go. But if you look at something and you say, I really like this, I really see how lots of people from my generation could like it. I really see how there isn't a lot of this, that it's difficult to grade, that it is rare, you know. And I see how a market could be built, because that's one of the keys. Is like, how is the market actually going to be built? Because you need some influencers, you need some avenue for people to believe in it and discover it, and these sorts of things. And you know, these are the types of talks that I've had, you know, with Pokemon Radar about Dragon Ball DBZ, and understanding the risks there. You know, Harry Potter. I know people who have like made $500,000 right in a few months on Harry Potter, 600,000. You know, because they're doing massive buyouts and now they're selling them. You know, and those massive buyout, like how much of that market was just driven up by massive buyouts, and you should stay away, or is it going to sustain because people are like, well, they're Harry Potter. They look exactly like the Wizards of the Coast, you know, Pokemon boxes. They're beautiful, and they're still 1/10 the price of Pokemon. And I think that actually makes sense to me, because I'm a diehard Harry Potter fan. You know, it's so hard to predict what's going to happen in all of that. But I think just trying to think through all of those things is important, and understanding the risks all associated with that. And then one really important thing is being able to argue something and then counter your own argument. So it's, you know, and I'm such a devil's advocate, as people know me in the community, because arguing is good. If we don't agree, don't be in a bubble, don't be in a chamber where everyone's agreeing with you, because if you're in a bearish chamber, you're going to miss out on some of the bullish, really smart talking points and growth strategies. And, you know, and if you're in that growth, you're going to not hear nearly enough about the risks and mitigate the downside and, you know, those sorts of things. So sorry, I'm going on and on. I apologize.
No, it's an awesome point. And I think that all three of us do a good job of that, of really bringing together varying perspectives so that people do have that. You know, it's one of the reasons that I created this podcast, all of those good things. It gives you more of that holistic perspective. And Jake, kind of a transition off of what you were talking about here, our last big topic for this month, you were talking about the boxes and the psychology of the market. I want to move now. Pokemon recently released a statement stating that they would be combating TCG shortages by reprinting impacted products at maximum capacity. So the question is this: what products or sets do you see them focusing on, and how far back in TCG expansions do you see them going to meet demand? So I guess I'll go ahead and lead us off in this last round. You know, for me, you know, when they're talking about impacted products, I think that, and this really spawns from my conversation with OmniPoke and getting a better idea of the competitive arena and how sets go out of rotation every 2 years, at least in the standard format. I think a lot of people have the expectation that if Pokemon reprints products, that they're going to go all the way back to, you know, 2017 and start reprinting Burning Shadows and, you know, some of these Sun and Moon sets. To me, I think that we're still in a pandemic and we still have limited capacity from a manpower standpoint. I know they've acquired a couple warehouses in the South that they'll be utilizing. But given that, I think at least over the course of the next year or so, they're really going to focus their efforts on upcoming sets and focusing on getting those newest sets onto retail shelves and making sure that there's plenty of those allotted, both from, you know, large big box stores, Walmart, Target, down to the local card game shops. And then beyond that, I really don't see them going any further back than probably Sword and Shield base set. I really think they'll focus on this this series, the Sword and Shield series, and really focus on getting plenty of those out on the market, because all of those sets are still in competitive rotation. And as we move out of the pandemic and we start to get more into competitive play, as regionals come back, as worlds come back, I think they're really going to try hard to appeal and make sure that there's enough product out on the market for these competitive players, while still appealing to the collectors out there that are just trying to get products on release day. So I've gotten that question a lot, and I know it's kind of been a hot topic this month with Pokemon releasing that statement. So that's kind of my take on it, and I'm interested to see, you know, where you guys come at this. I know both of you are more in the vintage realm, but it'll be interesting to hear, kind of what you think of the reprints and what Pokemon's mindset is and what's really driving it. So whoever wants to start.
Yeah, it's I mean, there are, so talking about that, I'm sure they've been printing, because of course, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense, nowadays, but I'm sure they've been printing to capacity or as much as they can be, and I think the press release was maybe a little bit of, and this is just, my opinion, just kind of to, you know, quell the fears, kind of make them seem like they're the good guys. It's like, hey guys, we're getting it, we're working as hard as we can. And it's sounded to me like a PR statement that someone puts out when, they are working as much as they can, but at the same time, I'm sure they're getting a lot of angry people who are like they're trying to order on. She apparently logged on to the Pokemon.
Your internet's
website,
cutting out a little bit. Z, do you hear
Pokemon
us?
Center website, and shining phase or something like a meat was put onto it. Oh, am I back? No.
We can hear you.
We can, we can hear some of it.
Back. Oh, you hear me? Okay. But yeah, she logged on to the website and immediately sold out of, she's like, oh, I thought I get. They can't really get the product at Pokemon Center. The secondary market is, 3, 4, 5 times what they're selling for, and to the distributor level. So in my opinion, they already are printing as much as they can. I think they have a tough balancing act, because we all know about the sports overprinting, right? In the 1990s, they're printing like crazy over there, and I don't think if you're the company, you don't want to devalue your cards to zero by just absolutely just printing literally as much as possible. I think at the same, the boxes are going up high, and I know like the graded PSA 10s and PSA 9s, I really haven't looked at it, but are the singles, if we're talking about, hey, they're printing it because of a 2-year window of competitive play, and these people who do competitive play want these cards, are the singles even like that are near mint condition, are those really high prices too? I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if they're all about, hey, we're only printing for this competitive play and whatnot, which we've had the virus, so there really hasn't been any. So if you're just printing it for that, are those really high prices too? I would think they wouldn't be that expensive. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't really know much about that aspect, but yeah, that'd kind of be my 2 cents. Hopefully you guys heard most of that.
I caught most of it, I think. I don't think I caught all of it.
we caught a good portion of the audio. I have to tell you, Z, that there was a point where your face was frozen. It wasn't the most appealing, the most appealing cut for you, but we heard most of it.
Yeah.
The thing I think about with that sort of stuff is trying to predict, what is Pokemon's future focus going to be? Is it going to be on collectors, or is it going to be on players? And what percentage is it going to be on collectors, and what percentage is it going to be on players? And there's been a sort of saying in Pokemon for a while that their focus with the reprints, was on players. They reprinted Roaring Skies players. They said, we don't care about you collectors and secondary market. We're willing to destroy the secondary market for the players with this set to get the shaman basically out there to more people. So, I don't think we know. I think there are good arguments to be made on both sides. I think that we're in a kind of new era potentially where you've got a lot of adults collecting. You've got a lot of moms and dads collecting with their kids. Collecting is having a definite renaissance in Pokemon, I would argue. I think very strongly without knowing this for 100% fact, obviously, but that the percentage of players to collectors, it's so much more collectors than it even was, a year and a half ago, and it's continuing to just weight more and more that way. How Pokemon responds to that is going to be really interesting. So reprinting, maybe they'll reprint more of the collector sets that they didn't before, when they were reprinting Hidden Fates, getting more of that product out there, things that they're not just reprinting things anymore for playability and to get more of those playable cards in people's hands. One change, I could see them printing Burning Shadows potentially for that Charizard. I could see them printing evolutions, because of the collectability. It's possible. Mm-hmm. So I think it's possible that they could go back and reprint the most collectible sets and the sets that are the most popular and people want. I think people are buying way more amount of evolutions than Burning Shadows. So I would assume evolutions would be a lot more before that. I think Burning Shadows, obviously has that rainbow rare Charizard in it, but the rest of the set, not super fun to open, difficult, very, difficult to create depending on the age of the box that, which printing you got of that box. All of that is, everything for me is just, we're in this common sense where you just got to kind of make up your own common sense around this stuff. Anyone who's telling you, I know guys, they're not going to reprint this, they're going to reprint that, this or that, unless they have insider knowledge, I kind of think they're selling you something a bit. And I would be pretty concerned, about following that too closely. I think that there's risk, it's added risk in all this modern product. I think it's part of why I think it's even more amazing, the prices that these things have gotten to, is because people are like, well, either we don't believe that that's a possibility, or we believe it, but we think these products are so great that we're factoring that in to these current prices. They'd be even higher if Pokemon came out and said, we're definitely not going to print anything. Those box prices would go even more. And I'm sure that they would, so, so do I think they're going to reprint evolutions? No. I mean, if I had to actually say, but again, it's random, it's random speculation. Do I think that they weren't working at maximum capacity already? I don't know. Maybe they are about to get some new contracts with different places, and they've outbid some of the sports, stuff that was printing at a place, and they know that they're about to get a few more factories opened or take over processing at some of these factories from other, and they're timing it with this release, so there is something substantive behind it, and maybe there isn't, right? And maybe it's a pure, PR move. I think both are possible. I think that if I was investing in Modern, I think that sealed boxes are the right way to go. I think just in terms of the rarity idea that over time, hopefully those boxes will become less and less of them. And the premium that you get from opening a booster box, that people are willing to pay so much more than the expected value for the gambler's premium, basically. And that I think will always be a thing because people love opening packs. So I think those things are objectively true. And so you can kind of lean on that. But I think the reprints are not object one way or another. I don't know. I think it's a risk. And I think that the expected value of the cards, inside is really really up in the air. That could wildly swing down with a lot of, particularly of the graded cards. We're seeing a lot of these mass buyouts on these waifus, on from people who run buyout groups that they charge $20 for a bunch of people to go in the group, and then they all buy the same card every month. These types of things that are happening in other markets are happening here. And are they planning to resell those raw, or all those being sold off to grading? That's the type of stuff where there's just risk, and you just have to make your own decisions. Everyone has to figure out, what their risk tolerance is. And I'm sure, James, you can speak to what you're seeing, in terms of at graded gem and on that modern topic, in terms of percentage of modern versus vintage and the sets that you're seeing the most. That's the objective hard data, you know, and of course there's so many more cards being graded outside of just what Graded Gem is seeing, but it can give you a decent window.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of modern cards. I would say the biggest ones, you know, I see are Evolutions and Hidden Fates. Those are probably, that's the majority of them are those two sets for sure. So if you're going from a pure, how many you're getting graded standpoint of, you know, reprints, you know, those would be the two that come through. And then it's the rest of the sets, you know, it's really just not even close between those two, honestly. And then you get some vintage and some Japanese, you know, promos or the Japanese sets of those, you know, like the you know, the shiny V's and you know, all that. But yeah, those two sets, if I'm talking about the amount of people that go through Graded Gem, it's definitely those two. Now, will that mean that those will be reprinted? Like I said, I've no clue. I know, you know, Hidden Fates has already been, you know, reprinted or going to be reprinted. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's all just crazy. The modern market, that's just a completely different animal. And the vintage market needs the modern market. I mean, it really does. I mean, if the modern collapses, I mean, the vintage, there's just a rotation between the two that happens in sports. I mean, it's just like they go back and forth between each other. So it'll be really interesting whenever these grading companies, whenever they come back, and if PSA card value prices really do just completely affect, you know, a box price. Like, I don't know, like these, you know, similarities or these, you know, congruencies between the two, you know, a sealed box price and a PSA, the cards inside, like Jake was saying, like the EV of some of these are just, you know, it doesn't make sense to open these boxes. You know, some of them, or actually, well, all of them don't make, you know, much sense if you're looking to make a profit. But yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens.
And the concern I have is that the shortage in the PSA cards caused the prices of the boxes to go up because people realized that for like on Evolutions, the expected value was actually higher for a period if you graded them. And so it creates this artificial reality that then pushes the booster box prices. Then other people see it as, oh, the booster box price is a good investment. They buy it to hold it. And it creates this sort of thing. I think the other big risk and danger of Pokemon versus sports is that the reason that the sports boxes right now, like when you're talking like 99 Fleer, you're seeing these boxes move, you know, boxes with like Gary Payton rookie, you know, these types of things in them right now. That Gary Payton rookie is going for like $600 or something in a PSA 10 right now. Those boxes were like $15 each, and you get like one Gary Payton per box or a couple Gary, whatever it is. And most of them grade 9s and 8s, but you do get a 10. So the value is huge. So lots of people are going out, ripping those boxes open. The reason those prices never went up or weren't able to sustain themselves on those now vintage sports cards was because not enough of them ever got opened because the expected value was so low. But they're having a resurgence of now where the PSA card is so valuable. The booster boxes are starting to be ripped again 30 years later. That won't happen in Pokemon, guys, because all of the cards are being graded. Whereas Gary Payton cards weren't being graded back then. So the premium on the booster boxes, because it's the only way to get the gem mint Gary Payton, which is the one going for a lot right now. And we don't even know if that'll sustain itself. So that's another thing you have to worry about in Pokemon. So even if you say, well, yeah, those sports ones were able to go up now, you know, and worst case scenario, that's what happens to our Pokemon boxes is they plummet, they go back to even below retail, you know, just like sports did. But then in the future, they came back up anyway, or started to come back up anyway. Well, as I said, the only reason that's happening now is because of grading, and we don't have that to lean on. So listen, it's tough. Nobody knows the answers to these things. If there's enough demand, what we could be looking at right now is just the start of you know, we might have 3 more upward cycles or something before we see that big correction, you know, something like that. And that multi-generations getting in and people staying in the hobby, like it is possible that this sustains itself and goes up. But yeah, there's a reason why I'm the rarity, why I talk about rarity all the time, is because all that stuff scares me and it's too hard for me to put numbers on. And so, whereas rarity is very simple to me, and I know 100 guys in this hobby are always going to want my tropical wind card, you know. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty confident that they're always going to want it, and they're just going to keep making more money in their careers, and there's always going to be some crazy bidding war for that card. So I think that that's the type of stuff you have to think about, but it's hard because I'll make videos like that on my channel and people will say, well, I don't have that kind of money, what do I do? And it's hard to be like, don't put money into Pokemon, man. like yeah. Build out, you know what I mean? Like invest in your future or start a business, and if you're doing flipping, that's very different. And that's part of why exactly. I send them to channels like, you know, like Z and stuff that you say PokéNav to, you know, flipping and selling this stuff and making a business out of it because you really understand the market and you can do it effectively is very different than long-term investing. Mm-hmm. So that's an area that has a lot of risk, but there's also can be quite a bit of upside, and lots of people do it successfully, you know? So I'm not like, I definitely am not like there's always going to be money to be made in Pokemon flipping, no matter whether you're in a bull or bear market. So.
Yeah, I think you're right on the mark there with the demand. It's just, the demand is just so high right now. It's like, the supply is coming of PSA cards and other, I mean, they're coming. I mean, they're not just going to hold on to it forever. It's coming down the line. So the demand is the real kind of question mark there. And you said like you like rarity, and that eliminates your kind of supply problem that's coming. So, you know, problem being, you know, maybe the wrong word, because it's good to have a lot of supply and a lot of demand, kind of create a fluid, you know, liquid market. But yeah, I mean, the supply is coming, and it's just going to really depend on how that demand looks, how long it lasts, you know, and how, you know, and modern vintage, it's just a different market, you know, like Lauren, my wife, is likes opening modern product because I'm not going to let her open a $500 pack or $1,000 pack. It's like, come on, it's like we can use that for, you know, investing and stuff like that. But she can open a $5 pack, and that's fine. You know, okay, all right, whatever. And it's just a different feel with the modern market. Because it's like people like just opening, and at the same time, people they like having mint cards. Like you can't really. It's tough to find mint vintage stuff. It's like you open a pack, it's like, oh, I got a mint full art whatever card, you know. So it's just they're two really different markets, but they really do play off each other. And the demand aspect is that's going to be the most interesting, you know, dynamic one.
And if there are like 10,000 of each of these Hidden Fates shiny cards versus 50,000 of each in PSA 10, you know, in 10 years, that's a humongous difference, right? So the market can much more easily absorb the 10,000, the 5 to 10,000 than a 20 to 50,000. So, and maybe it'll be big enough to absorb the whole thing because there will be enough Pokemon fans and enough buyers. I don't know. That's the thing. And there's this whole idea of like, maybe Pokemon is just so big. And I made a video on this, like the thing that was holding it back was the coolness. It was like, it was socially acceptable for grown men and grown women to collect sports or, you know, do some antiques or these sorts of things. And the shift to like, it's more socially acceptable to be grown men with our Pokemon cards, you know, and displaying them in a house one day as something that's actually like a cool part of our childhood, that when they see, they have a positive impression of us, not a weird negative impression of us. Like that type of thing is so huge in terms of the potential, because I think that so many people would enjoy it and find joy and value from this hobby. Also, if they could share it with people in their life, and it wasn't something that they just shared with, you know, just these small like niche communities online, which is I think what it was forever. You know, I know Scott Pratt used to talk all the time about how he'd have to say quickly that he was making a lot of money. When he would tell people that he did Pokemon, he'd have to follow it up with, I'm making a lot of money doing it, I'm not a weirdo, you know, like to justify it, because there's almost that shame of it, you know. And it'll be interesting, like one day, Z, you know, you're full-time Pokemon, it's like, are you going to be ashamed of saying that you're full-time Pokemoner, or are you going to say, I'm this in your group of friends, and they're going to be like, that's awesome, man. We all love Pokemon. We all wish we were doing what you were doing. It's like two very different worlds.
Yeah. And that's the tough thing about, like, when you were talking about looking at sports cards or Marvel or comic books from like the 90s or 80s or whatever, because it's social media. It's just a completely different animal that we don't really know how, these influencers and everybody can share their cards, and hey, there's that, and this like networking aspect that it wasn't around during other collectibles. It's like you might collect it and you have it on your shelf and nobody ever saw it. Nobody even like knew about it. You couldn't connect with each other to buy and sell and see what stuff is happening and watch YouTube videos. And it's just a different era, and who knows, maybe it's exciting, but at the same time, it's a new world out there. Like we're saying, like NFTs, just digital, it's a strange time. So
have you heard about NFTs yet, PokéNav?
No, this was the first time when James had referred to it.
I just learned about them just a few weeks ago. And yeah, I've been doing some deep dives. You should definitely look into it. And is that what effect is that going to bolster the physical card market and be something that brings more people into that? Or is that going to take away from it? And it's well beyond just having these sort of sports moments that they're selling. They're doing all like art, everything and anything. Yeah.
It's like a different level of, it's like you have the people, the people who do, stock market and real estate, and they're like, oh, why would you ever do sports cards? That's dumb. And then the sports cards people, it's like, oh, why would you do Pokemon? That's dumb. And then there's like a level that's like, why would you do crypto? It's like, that's just like made up digital nothing. And then there's a down below that, it's like these NFTs, and there's just these levels, where there's a lot of money at every single level. Mm-hmm. There's always people who be like, oh, that's ridiculous. But
there's always the greater genius or the greater fool, depending on your perspective.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, and the really exciting thing is we're lucky enough to be on the precipice and be here to see these things actually occur. That's one thing that I'm thankful for, is that I can be here and I'm alive and I can witness these things and have the opportunity to be a part of them. And, the NFT, in a lot of ways, it kind of makes sense to me. If history is any precedence, it seems like we just continue to move from the tangible to the digital on pretty much everything. And so I can certainly see that following suit. But I think we will go ahead and wrap it up there, guys. This was awesome conversation. And, these were the big topics on most people's minds. It sounds like you guys have been getting a lot of questions in regards to these questions as well. So again, this was the real intention of the roundtable, was to try to get these varying perspectives and kind of give people that holistic outlook. And I probably don't need to shout out your guys' channel. Anybody that's listening to this probably already knows about you guys on your various handles. But I just want to thank you guys very much for being here. And in coming months, I'd love to have you guys back for another roundtable discussion.
Thank you very much. Subscribe to PokéNav's channel if you haven't already.
But all right, guys, well, that is going to do it for this month. We will see you next time right here on the Pokemon Roundtable discussions. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll see you all next time.